Rain fell in thin silver streaks across the downtown street, blurring the neon signs into trembling reflections on the wet pavement. Traffic rolled past in slow, hissing waves, and the air smelled of coffee, gasoline, and damp concrete. To anyone watching, it looked like an ordinary evening in the city. No one would have guessed it was about to become the site of a disappearance that would haunt the nation. Ayla Rahman stood just outside a small corner cafe, one hand gripping her phone, the other clutching the strap of her handbag. She wore a light jacket that did little to protect her from the cold, but she barely noticed. Her full attention was on the voice whispering through the phone. "You're sure they don't know?" she asked quietly. Her eyes darted across the busy street. Couples passed. A bus rumbled by. A street vendor argued with a customer. Life moved forward, unaware that hers was beginning to unravel. The voice on the other end replied too softly to hear, but whatever it said made Ayla swallow hard. "You promised," she said. "You said this was the only way." A gust of wind rattled the cafe's windows. Ayla turned slightly, lowering her voice even more. "I did everything you asked. If they find out, I'm dead." There was a pause. Then the call abruptly ended. Ayla stared at her phone. "No, no, no," she whispered. She tried to call back. No signal. A deep, instinctive fear settled into her stomach, the kind that didn't come from imagination, but from something real and close. Slowly, she lifted her head. That was when she noticed him. Across the street, beneath a flickering streetlight, a man stood completely still. He wasn't using his phone. He wasn't waiting for a bus. He was simply standing there, watching her. Ayla's breath caught. She told herself she was being paranoid. In a crowded city, people looked at each other all the time. But the longer she stared, the more certain she became that this man wasn't just looking, he was tracking her. She took a cautious step toward the cafe door. The man didn't move. She took another. Still nothing. Her heart pounded harder. Ayla turned away and began walking down the sidewalk, pretending everything was normal. She passed a clothing store, then a bakery. She could feel eyes on her back, burning through her jacket. "Don't panic," she whispered to herself. "Just keep walking." Then a voice spoke behind her. "Excuse me." Ayla froze. The voice was close, too close. She turned slowly. A tall man stood a few feet away. He wore a dark jacket and a neutral expression that might have looked friendly if not for his cold, unblinking eyes. "You dropped something," he said. Ayla glanced down. Nothing was on the ground. "I didn't," she said, her voice shaking. "Please, I'm in a hurry." The man stepped closer. "You should come with me," he said softly. "Someone wants to see you." Fear surged through her veins. "I don't know you," she replied, backing away. "Stay away from me." The man's jaw tightened. "You know exactly who I am." Ayla's face drained of color. She opened her mouth to scream. A car horn blasted loudly beside them, making her flinch. For one split second, her eyes shifted toward the street. That was all it took. A sudden force grabbed her arm. She tried to pull free, but another hand clamped over her mouth. Her scream died in her throat. People nearby heard only the honking car and the rush of rain. No one noticed the brief struggle in the shadows between passing headlights. By the time anyone looked back, Ayla was gone. Her handbag slipped from her shoulder and hit the pavement. Coffee spilled across the sidewalk. The cafe door swung open as a worker stepped outside. "Hey," the woman said, confused. "Wasn't someone just here?" People began to murmur. "Yeah, the girl with the phone. Where did she go? Did you see her leave?" Within minutes, police sirens sliced through the rain-soaked air. Detective Haris Qureshi arrived shortly after, his coat already wet as he ducked under the police tape. Officers pointed him toward the abandoned bag. He knelt beside it, examining it carefully. "Anything stolen?" "No," an officer replied. "Wallet, phone, keys, all still inside." Haris frowned. "That makes no sense." He opened the bag and gently removed its contents. Everything was neatly organized, as if Ayla had been on her way somewhere, not running from danger. Then he noticed a folded piece of paper tucked into a side pocket. Haris opened it. 4 words were written in shaky handwriting. "If I vanish, look." A chill crawled up his spine. Haris straightened slowly. This wasn't random. Ayla Rahman hadn't just disappeared, she had been preparing for it. And whatever she was afraid of, it was still out there, watching the street where she was last seen. By morning, the street where Ayla Rahman vanished looked ordinary again. Rainwater had washed away the spilled coffee, footprints were gone. The cafe opened as usual. People walked past the spot without knowing they were stepping over the echo of a crime. But Detective Haris Qureshi hadn't slept. He stood inside the precinct, staring at Ayla's photograph pinned to the board. 26 years old, quiet smile, no criminal record, no known enemies. The kind of person who wasn't supposed to disappear in the middle of a crowded street. And yet she had. "Still nothing?" Haris asked. An officer shook his head. "No ransom demand, no witnesses willing to go on record. Cameras caught her until the corner of 5th and Lawson, and then she's just gone." Haris turned toward the footage playing on the screen. There she was again, Ayla standing outside the cafe, talking on the phone, looking over her shoulder, fear creeping across her face in slow motion. Then the moment that bothered Haris the most. She didn't fight. She hesitated, like she recognized the danger but didn't know how to escape it. "Run her background again," Haris said. "Friends, family, work, I want everything." Ayla's apartment. Ayla's apartment was small, neat, and unsettlingly quiet. Her bed was made. Her laptop sat open on the desk, frozen on a blank design file. A half-watered plant drooped near the window. It looked like she had stepped out for a moment and never came back. Haris walked slowly through the space, letting instinct guide him. Kidnapping victims often left signs, panic, chaos, a life interrupted. But Ayla's home felt controlled, almost staged. "Detective," an officer called from the bedroom. "You'll want to see this." Haris joined him. Inside the closet, tucked behind winter coats, was a burner phone. No name, no contact saved, just one unsent message on the screen. "They're closer than you think." Haris exhaled slowly. "So she knew," Haris murmured. "Knew she was being watched, knew something was coming." The question was, why didn't she run? The friend who knew too much. Ayla's best friend Mariam sat across from Haris later that day, gripping a paper cup of coffee she hadn't touched. "She was scared," Mariam said quietly. "For who?" Haris asked. "She wouldn't say. Every time I asked, she'd shut down, said it was safer if I didn't know." Mariam swallowed hard. "She told me if anything happened to her, it wouldn't be random." That sentence landed heavily between them. "Did she mention anyone specific?" Haris pressed. Mariam nodded slowly. "There was a man. She met him online months ago, said he had information that could help her with something." "With what?" "She wouldn't tell me," Mariam said. "But after meeting him, she changed, started checking locks twice, stopped taking the same route home." "Do you know his name?" Mariam hesitated. "She called him Z." The second phone. Back at the station, cybercrime traced activity from Isla's burner phone. Encrypted messages, deleted threads, a pattern of late-night communications with a single contact, Z. The messages were careful, coded, never explicit, until the last one. I'm scared. I think they know. The reply came seconds later. Too late to stop now. Harris leaned back in his chair. This wasn't a random abduction. This was a collapse of something carefully built. The building on Ash Lane. Z's digital trail led to a decaying apartment building on Ash Lane, a place most people avoided. Graffiti stained the walls, lights flickered, the air smelled of mold and rust. Harris and his team moved quietly. Apartment 3B was unlocked. Inside, the walls were covered in photographs. Isla, walking to work, sitting in cafes, entering her apartment, talking on the phone. All photos taken without her knowledge. She was being stalked, an officer whispered. Harris's eyes locked onto a notebook lying open on the table. He flipped through it. Dates, times, locations, her routine. On the last page, a single sentence was written in bold. She will be ready tonight. Harris felt his pulse quicken. Get this place sealed. Find the tenant now. But the tenant was already gone. Zaid Malik, age 32, no fixed employment, had vanished 2 days earlier, just like Isla. The witness who changed everything. That night, a taxi driver came forward. I didn't think it mattered, he said nervously, but I saw her. Saw who? Harris asked. The girl, from the cafe. The driver described pulling over at a red light near 5th Street. She was standing there, talking to a man. Then another guy showed up, tall, dark jacket. Harris stiffened. Did she fight? The driver shook his head. No. That's the strange part. She looked scared, but she went with them. Where? Into a black van. That detail sent a ripple through the room. Not dragged, not forced, led. Harris stared at Isla's photo again. What had she been involved in? And more importantly, what had she uncovered that made someone risk taking her in public? A message from the dead. At 2:17 a.m., Harris's phone buzzed. A new alert from cybercrime. Signal detected. The burner phone. Active. The message appeared on the screen. I'm still alive, but they're watching me. The signal was traced to the industrial district, an abandoned factory. Harris grabbed his coat. Move, he said. Now. Because if Isla Rahman was still alive, she was running out of time. The abandoned factory rose like a dead giant against the night sky. Broken windows stared out like hollow eyes. Rusted metal doors groaned in the wind. Detective Harris Qureshi stood behind his car, staring at the building where Ayla's signal had been traced. She was here, the tech officer confirmed. The message came from inside. Harris tightened his grip on his flashlight. Let's go. The team moved in silently, boots crunching over broken glass. Inside, the factory was a maze of shadows and echoing corridors. Their flashlights cut thin beams through dust and darkness. Ayla, Harris called. Police, if you can hear me, call out. No answer. They reached a large room filled with old machinery. On the floor lay a thin mattress, plastic water bottles, food wrappers. She had been here, but she was gone. One of the officers knelt near a small table. Detective, there's blood. Just a few drops. Not enough to mean death, enough to mean fear. Harris felt his stomach tighten. They were being played. The network revealed. Back at headquarters, analysts worked through everything found at the factory. The notebook from Ash Lane, Zaid Malik's computer, the burner phone. A pattern emerged. This wasn't just about Ayla. Zaid had been part of a recruitment network, men who targeted lonely women online, slowly gaining their trust, pulling them into secret meetings. But it wasn't prostitution. It was worse. Human trafficking, selling women to powerful clients who never left a trail. And Ayla? Harris asked. She wasn't a victim, an analyst replied. She was pretending to be one. Harris looked up sharply. She was collecting evidence, the analyst continued, recording messages, tracking locations. She was trying to expose them. The room went silent. So they took her, Harris said slowly, because she got too close. Exactly. Harris felt a mix of anger and grim respect. Ayla Rahman hadn't been running. She had been hunting. A dangerous lead. A few hours later, a surveillance alert came in. A woman matching Ayla's description was seen leaving the industrial district, alive, walking beside a man. Harris stared at the paused frame. The man's face was partially visible. His blood ran cold. "That's Saad," Harris said. "Who?" "Ayla's ex-boyfriend." Saad had been questioned in the first days after Ayla disappeared. He'd seemed cooperative, calm, sad. Too calm. "Get me everything on him," Harris snapped. They did, and what they found was ugly. Financial ties to shell companies, phone records linking him to Zaid, payments from offshore accounts. Saad hadn't just known about the network, he'd helped run it. The truth about the night. Reconstructed data showed Saad had been near the cafe that night, watching, waiting. He had used his history with Ayla to lower her guard, to lure her into a situation where she could be controlled. But Ayla knew. She had been feeding him false trust while secretly gathering proof. And now both of them were in the open. But Ayla wasn't free. She was being moved. Ayla's choice. In a dim motel room on the edge of the city, Ayla sat on a bed, her wrists untied, but her fear still tightly bound. Saad stood near the door. "You should have stayed quiet. I trusted you once. That was my mistake." Saad's eyes darkened. "You were going to destroy everything." "That was the plan." He laughed bitterly. "You think the police will protect you? You've seen too much." Ayla said nothing, but her phone vibrated in her pocket. One last message had gone through before the signal died. Enough. Harris moves in. Police tracked Saad's vehicle to a highway motel. Harris led the team. He won't kill her. Not yet. She's too valuable. They surrounded the building. Harris knocked on the door. "Saad Malik, open up." Inside, Ayla held her breath. The door burst open. Saad reached for a gun. He was too slow. Police flooded the room. Ayla dropped to the floor as Saad was tackled, cuffed, finished. But it wasn't over. Not yet. Because the network he served was still out there, and they would come for her. Ayla sat wrapped in a blanket inside the back of a police van, staring at the rain sliding down the windows. Red and blue lights flashed against her tired face as officers moved in and out, securing the motel. She was alive, but the weight of what she had uncovered still pressed heavily on her chest. Detective Haris Qureshi climbed inside and sat across from her. "You planned it," he said quietly. "The bag, the message. You knew they'd take you." Ayla nodded. "I needed the police involved without tipping them off," she said. "If I went to you directly, they would have killed me before I reached your door." "So you disappeared." "I let them think they'd won." Haris leaned back slowly. "You were building a case." "For months," Ayla replied. "Zaid recruited me online. I pretended to be desperate, vulnerable. I gained their trust." Her voice shook slightly. "They were selling women to powerful men, men who think they're untouchable." "And Saad?" Haris asked. "He was their closer. He delivered us." The betrayal cut deeper than any wound. The network falls. Saad didn't talk, but Zaid did. Faced with decades in prison, he gave the police everything: names, bank accounts, locations. Within 48 hours, raids took place across the city. Warehouses, hotels, apartments. Dozens of trafficked women were rescued. High-ranking criminals were arrested. A hidden empire collapsed. News channels exploded with the story. The vanished woman who broke a crime syndicate. But Isla's face was never shown. She had become a target. The final threat. 2 days later, Horace received a warning. One of the buyers had escaped, a man with power, money, and a need for revenge. They'll come for her, Horace told his team. This isn't over. Isla was placed in protective custody, but even behind locked doors, danger followed. One night, the power went out. Emergency lights flickered. A shadow moved down the hallway. Isla locked her door just as footsteps approached. Someone tried the handle. Then a gunshot shattered the silence. Horace and his team arrived seconds later. The assassin lay on the floor, dead. The message was clear. They hadn't forgotten her. A new identity. The next morning, Horace sat with Isla one final time. "You can't stay," he said. "Not here, not with your name. I know. You'll disappear for real this time." Isla smiled sadly. "I guess I'm good at that." Witness protection gave her a new life, new city, new face, new name. The woman who vanished from the street no longer existed, but the truth she left behind changed everything. The real reason she left her bag. Weeks later, Horace returned to the cafe where Isla disappeared. The same sidewalk, the same street, the same rain. He stared at the spot where her handbag had been found. She hadn't dropped it, she had left it. A silent signal, a trap for monsters, a way to make the world look. Final twist. Months later, Horace received a letter with no return address. Inside was a photo of a woman standing on a beach, alive, free. On the back were 4 words, "You kept looking." And because he did, they found the truth.